This is Real and Present This Week, the podcast version of my weekly newsletter all about mindfulness. So I've decided to create a podcast version of my weekly newsletter. The podcast will be a little bit longer than the newsletter. I intentionally keep the newsletter nice and short, wanting to respect your time while you're going through your inbox. But if you're listening to this, probably you are driving somewhere or on a walk or otherwise in a place where you have a little bit more time to think a little bit more broadly about some of the topics that come up in the newsletter. As I said in the newsletter this week, the events on the world stage have been on my mind, as they have been on the minds of many people. I'm thinking specifically about violence in the Middle East, but the media has a short attention span, and while these horrible events have been unfolding in the Middle East, of course, violent conflicts have continued to rage on in other parts of the world, including Ethiopia, Sudan, Myanmar, elsewhere. And of course, closer to home, there are plenty of examples of conflict and violence that are disturbing. And I've been thinking about what mindfulness has to do with these horrible events. I think when we think of mindfulness and meditation, we think about sitting still and quieting our mind, and it seems inherently to be a very passive activity, and one that doesn't seem to have a lot of action associated with it. So, how does meditation become relevant with respect to injustice in the world, violence, conflict? Well, I think that what happens when we meditate actually has tremendous relevance to what is occurring in the world today. I often say that meditation is a dress rehearsal for the rest of the day. It is an opportunity to observe our mind and our thoughts and consciousness in kind of ideal circumstances. But then what we observe and learn, we then can take out into the world. And when I observe what is occurring in consciousness, I am struck with what a privilege and how beautiful consciousness is, how remarkable it is that in this universe, conscious beings have come into existence here on Earth. I don't know if there are conscious beings elsewhere in the universe. I suspect we will never know. But it is an extraordinary occurrence, in my opinion. And the more I continue to observe and appreciate consciousness as I experience it, the more I value consciousness that is inherent in other conscious beings and other people. And I think that inevitably leads to both honoring and treasuring other people as loci of consciousness, and also compassion for other people, knowing the burdens of the egoic self that they are operating under. And that compassion only grows as I continue to see more clearly the burdens of egoic self that I operate under, and that I work to free myself from, partly through the practice of mindfulness. So when we get up from meditating, I think we are then primed to respond to others with gratitude and with compassion. So in that way, as I say in the newsletter, mindfulness is kind of a third way. It is a path between passivity and outrage. Being angry on its own is not in any way of service to humanity, but being completely passive is not of any service to humanity either. So from this place of gratitude and compassion, I think that we can find tremendous motivation to be active in the name of justice, while at the same time choosing actions that are rooted in compassion and understanding of the challenges under which other people are acting in such a way that our actions are more likely to be productive and to move us in the direction of peace. I reference in the newsletter a white paper put out by Harvard's Pluralism Project, and that white paper was talking about something called engaged Buddhism. But in that paper, the authors talk about not just making peace, but being peace. I think the first step towards peace is establishing peace within ourselves. I'm not sure what the point is of bringing peace to the world if everyone is still going to be miserable. So we must first establish peace within ourselves. And then when we're at peace, I think that is inherently contagious. There's something viral about a person who is at peace and responds rather than reacts to what is occurring around them. But even more than that, when we are at peace, we then conserve our time and our energy so that we then have time and energy to actually be active in spreading that peace out around us. And that may take the form of simply speaking up for justice. It may take the form of treating others more justly and compassionately ourselves, or it may take the form of other actions of advocacy and justice. And those actions would take a wide range of forms depending on the circumstances. So at the end of the day, I think that our practice of mindfulness, while itself being an exercise in stillness, becomes both a way of seeing the world and a way of living that makes us more compassionate, more grateful for others, and ultimately, I think, more effective as advocates and agents of peace and justice in the world. So just as a way of practicing this, I suggested in the newsletter that you look out this week for occasions when you are feeling some sort of conflict with another person. And when you feel that sensation of conflict, anger, frustration, see if you can just take a moment to think about the burden of egoic self that other person is operating under, as well as the other life circumstances that person is experiencing, and take a moment to recognize that person as a locus of consciousness and how amazing and valuable that is. And then just see how that exercise of transforming the way that you are thinking about this other person changes your perception of the situation and maybe changes the way that you respond to it. Just see what happens. With that, I will see you again next week. I hope that you are finding something helpful with the newsletter and or this podcast. Feel free to reach out to me at eric@realandpresent.com and let me know your thoughts. Let me know how this podcast and the newsletter can better serve you. And until then, be well.